Okay, Blake, if you had one idea, what would it be to put up on social media to make it go viral?
At this point, I'm just writing the daily TikTok trend of the day.
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who wonders how much we should embarrass ourselves on TikTok for views. And I'm here with my boss who loves embarrassing himself more than anyone I have ever met, Toby Walters.
See, I don't think it's embarrassing when you're awesome.
Well, no, look, you and I hold this viewpoint, unlike most people, that as long as you get the laugh, it's good. Brian Deshawn, he also holds this, but I think there's not many people like that are just willing to embarrass themselves for no reason.
No, I don't get embarrassed. It's the thing. Like, I'll do something that is ridiculous, and I'm like, I meant to do that because it's awesome. Because I'm awesome, right, Blake?
Yes. Well,
I mean, viral moments. Like, how long have you been alive, Blake?
I've been alive a long time, 29 years.
So I'm just thinking of the last decade, some of these like ridiculous viral moments, like Gangnam Style. You remember that?
You know what, Toby? That was actually that was the one dance I could do in college.
Oh man!
And I went to a very Christian college, so they just started having a dance when I was there, and so that's the one dance I could do.
Yeah.
So I do remember.
I'd
that
like
one.
video of that. How about Baby Panda? Do you remember that sneeze?
I don't.
Oh man, it's Baby Panda sneezes and surprises mom. Like mom just like jumps, and it's hilarious. And then Baby Shark.
Oh gosh, let's not start that song in our heads. Every preschool teacher everywhere is freaking out thinking of that one.
And do you know the guy that it was just like a dad that made that up for his kids, and he's worth like $200 million now.
No.
Yeah.
That song made him that.
It's insane.
I'm surprised the intellectual property wasn't just stolen from him. That's how those typically go on that guy.
Yeah, so you're a brand guy, Blake.
That's what I tell people.
What's the secret sauce to making something go viral?
Well, you need, it's kind of like how comedians do it. You need something that is universally true and felt by everyone, but no one has said it out loud. So like, what is something all husbands experience? That if they're a comedian, you would then make a joke about that, and it would so deeply resonate with people, they would crack up and love it. So that's kind of the first step on a viral video, but it's that plus luck.
Do you have a social post in your background that was clearly your biggest winner?
You know, I'm still disappointed that my marriage video didn't go viral because you know how you do the mother-son dance? I did it. Me and my mom did it to where, it's about 15 seconds into the dance, and then the music breaks, and suddenly we throw on these Pikachu glasses, and we dance to the theme song of Pokemon. And then I've got friends in the background throwing the Pokemon like characters all like into the room. This is happening in West Tennessee, small town America. They're like, who in the world is this kid that's marrying the girl from our town? It was hilarious. And when I share it on Facebook, I didn't set the permission structure to where other people could share it.
So maybe you need to repost it now that you have millions of listeners to the Church Gear podcast.
You know, but the thing is, they won't be surprised. They know I'm a doofus now.
That is true. One of my favorite memories is a friend of mine posted it, and it was winter one year, and he was in the backyard, and somebody else was filming this, but he's in the backyard, and it had been snowing. And so he picks up he makes a snowball, and he is a good 50 feet away from his son. His son's about 6 years old at this time. His son is up on the playset at the top of the slide. So he takes this snowball, throws it, and you see the whole trajectory of the snowball, and it curves through the air for 50 feet, smacks his son in the face, who then rolls down the slide.
That's incredible.
It was incredible.
You need if you want people to remark upon something, you need to make something remarkable. And that's pretty remarkable.
And that's like one of those moments you could never recreate that again without like CGI effects.
You know, to be truthful, that's probably the most viral component there is like you need something spontaneously awesome to happen while there's a camera going on. Like you can try to manufacture them, but they kind of just have to come. It's kind of appear out of nowhere. You know who also is really great at appearing out of nowhere and hitting someone in the face on the top of a slide? It's the lead audio engineer and live production lead at Prestonwood Baptist, Mike Smith. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Oddly enough, that is not a skill that I possess.
You don't think you could throw a snowball like that?
I don't know, but all I can think of is Elf when you were describing that when he's in Central Park. when he's throwing the snowball at the bullies.
Hold on, Blake. Have you seen Elf?
I have, and I think it's the most overrated Christmas movie on the planet.
You're fired.
Okay, so here's my my hot take on Elf. The first part of the movie up until the last 20 minutes is amazing, and the last 20 minutes is just stupid.
Christmas movies struggle to stick the landing.
Yeah, but it's like once it gets into everybody singing the same song all over the city, I'm out. I literally, when I watch that movie at Christmas time, I get to that part in the thing right after he yells at the author right after Buddy's dad yells at him in the conference room and he leaves. From that moment, I turn it off. I'm done because it stops just being Will Ferrell funny to just being kind of a cheesy Christmas movie. But it is a great movie.
Maybe I should give it another try.
Very, very, very quotable.
I'll give it another shot next Christmas because that was back when I still hated Christmas. My wife has turned me around on that now, so maybe I'll enjoy. I do love Christmas now.
So is The Grinch your favorite movie then? Because you identify?
I have a onesie, head to toe onesie of the Grinch for this reason.
That is true.
This is ridiculous. We're talking about Christmas in February, but who cares? Mike, where does Christmas Vacation rank for you though? Is that above Elf?
It's actually been a while since I've seen it, but I end up watching Elf. Elf's a little more family friendly, so Elf gets probably watched more frequently than Christmas Vacation, but there are some really great lines in Christmas Vacation.
Oh, I'm devastated.
Yeah, my kids haven't seen Christmas Vacation yet.
Well, that's probably the next step in their development.
It's a little racy at times.
It is. There's a little bit of language in it, so it's like better be cautious who you watch that around.
I have a feeling my kid will watch that at about 9 years old. All right, so let's move to the 5 truths and a lie now that we've talked about Christmas in February. Okay, let's see if we can get this, Toby. Number 1, met my wife in Australia.
And that makes me wonder, is she Australian or is she American and they just met in Australia?
And did she need to get her green card?
Yeah.
Number 2, I have a BA in music. Oh, so he's a bad in music.
He's a bad in music?
He's a bad in music.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say the other word. Number 3, I wanted to say a Christmas Vacation word there.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, he cooks dinner most nights for the family.
All right. He looks like a man who's skilled with his hands in the kitchen.
Yeah, he looks wholesome. Number 4, served at my previous church for over 30 years.
That's a long tenure.
I can't imagine being somewhere for 30 years and then switching churches. Brian Bailey must have just had like a crystal ball to force him over there. Or he blackmailed him.
Maybe.
Number 5, mixed front of house and monitors for Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber, who played piano for John Legend and Sarah Bareilles.
Oh my gosh, Blake.
Bareilles?
Bareilles. You don't know Sarah Bareilles? You know a couple of her songs, that's for darn
I'm sure I know her songs. Number 6, and finally, started my career by editing a national radio program on reel-to-reel machines. Now, is that like TikTok Reels? Instagram Reels?
Blake often embarrasses himself, so you're getting your first view into this.
I'm just being quiet while you guys read the points. So I'm just
like a reel-to-reel
keeping
machine
my comments
is
to
like
myself.
old school tape.
No, I know. I just wanted to.
Do you though?
Well, yeah, because I sent you that picture of the one my dad had in his garage. Remember a couple years ago, I was like, should we sell this?
So Mike can correct me a little bit, but with old school like tape, you actually have to like lay it down on an editing block, and you use little marking pencils, and then you slice it with a razor blade. China markers. You slice it with a razor blade, and then tape it back together. That's how you edit tape.
Mike, you are incredible. You are incredible that you were able to edit like that. That's amazing. Well, maybe he's lying.
That's how the whole community did it.
Yeah.
Or am I?
He's done a great job of getting nothing away. Like, I'm looking at his face. He's said nothing. He's made no expressions.
But like before early 2000s, that's how all editing was done.
Really?
And some people still do it that way.
Why would they still edit that way, though?
Because they record to tape. Like bands like White Stripes and Foo Fighters, like they want to record straight to tape. Now, they'll probably dump it into Pro Tools and then edit digitally at this point in the world, but I'm sure there's still some guys out there that are just editing tape.
Look, I get it. Every industry has its purist, and it's like that advancement in technology actually took some soul out of what we were working on. That's the same thing for movies. Yeah. Oh, man. This is really difficult. None of these are like...
I've got my guess.
All right. Well, you go first.
I'm going to guess that the lie is that he cooks dinner most nights. I'm going to say that he is actually a terrible cook and his wife doesn't want him anywhere near the kitchen.
Okay. I'm going to say he didn't... I wanted to say the Australian one. I'm going to waffle here. I'm going to go back to I don't know.
Just make a decision already,
I don't-
millennial.
I want to beat you, Toby. I'm going to say he did not meet his... No, I'm going to say
Oh my gosh. You're out of time.
All right, he does not have a BA in music. That's what I'm going to go with.
What's
Okay,
that?
locked
Toby's
in.
correct.
Yes!
Toby's correct.
Blake,
I need to stop.
I read these questions or these things to my wife, and she laughed out loud when I read her that one. So I did meet my wife in Australia. However, she is not Australian. She just happened to be on a church trip that we were at down there and met her down there. And then when we got back to the States, we had stuff to talk about. So
I'm telling you, these mission trips, Blake, are how like 50% of the Christian couples get together.
I'm not going to say what I'm thinking. So you did serve at your other church for 30 years. That's a long time.
over 30
Mike.
years. Yep.
Over 30
Yep.
years.
I was there. I started in late 80 or spring of 89, and I left at the end of 2018.
And was this
So
Harvest Church?
I worked there. I worked there longer than you've been alive, Blake.
Well, just barely, but yes, that is crazy. Tell us about working with Sir Andrew Lloyd Webber and John Legend.
Yeah, I used to do freelance work in California, and there was one thing that we did. It was it was like Emmy's consideration event, and they did a TV version of Jesus Christ Superstar, and it was like trying to promote them to get nominated for an Emmy for that. And at that event, Andrew Lloyd Webber was there, and he doesn't play publicly, and he actually played piano. I didn't know this at the time but he played piano because John Legend played Jesus, I believe, in it, and then Sarah Bareilles was in it, and he played for them while they sang. So it was kind of a cool moment to be able to do that, because I was mixing front of house and monitors from the same position. So,
And I mostly know his name from Phantom of the Opera.
oh man, he's a Broadway giant. I mean, Les Mis. I mean, they're just on and on and on the things that he's done. Actually, I may be wrong about some of them, but yeah, so he's a big guy.
Big.
And so talk to Blake about editing on tape.
That's what I was going to ask
Did I get it all
next.
correct?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So you
No, tell him he messed
back
it up.
in the early 90s. I was actually, when I first started working for Harvest, I was actually doing custodial work in the radio. The radio show, the radio program called A New Beginning was across the street from the main campus, and I started by just doing custodial work over there, and then eventually, because I was in school for music, I ended up kind of gravitating into the editing realm, and that's how we did it. It was reel-to-reel machine, and exactly what you said. You use a razor blade, and you cut, and then you splice with tape back together again, and yep. And then I can vividly remember the first time I don't even remember what it was now, but the first time I ever saw a digital audio recorder, and it blew my mind. It was, it was pretty old technology, especially compared to now. But, that's how we were doing at the beginning, was reel to reels.
And Blake, this is like high stakes. So imagine you fly in Frank Sinatra for a recording session, and then he goes home, and then the tape editor has to, remove breaths or coughs or whatever. If he messes up, what do you think's going to happen?
I think he'll be sleeping with the fishes. But
That's right.
how do you even see it? Like, you're on this physical reel. How do you cut the breath out of that?
It's not visual, it's audible. So they call it scrubbing. So you got, a hand on each reel as you're rotating it back and forth, and you're listening to it, and you find the spot where you want it and you mark it. Yep.
Okay. That
We'll show you some YouTube videos later.
I do want to see how that goes.
Yeah.
It almost sounds like the precursor to DJing. Okay, well, going back to the serving your church for over 30 years, that's kind of wild. So give us a bit more of like your background. From internet stalking you, it seems like you worked at Harvest Church. You already said that, to Harvest Crusades, to now Prestonwood. So, I mean, how did that journey go from church to church?
Well, I mean, Harvest Crusades are part of Harvest, so that was just an outreach extension of Harvest. So it was all the same organization. And at one point, I think we would do 5 of those events in a year. So it eventually kind of scaled back to just being a couple of larger events in the year. But yeah, I mean, when I started again, it was radio program stuff. And then eventually they farmed that out to the company that's still doing it to this day, doing the editing for the broadcast. So at that point, they were needing somebody to help with audio, and I was going to school for music, hence the BA in music. It just so that was just something I was doing while I was going to school, and eventually found out I had a bit of a knack for it. Was eventually kind of running the department. I still have a great relationship with all the guys back there. We have a GroupMe thread. It's called the Old Gang that we still frequently text each other in. And so shout out to those guys, Chris and Brian and the guys. And, but anyway, yeah, so I was leading the department, and then, I graduated from college, and I had music, and originally I wanted to be like a touring musician. I really was interested in film scoring and all these other things, but I had no idea what I should do. And the worship pastor that was my boss at the time said, well, you're doing audio, you're getting paid to do audio. Are you enjoying that? And I was like, well, yeah, I am. And he goes, all right, well, then see where that takes you. So I finished, I got out of college, I did some more music, and then eventually here I am. I was around enough musicians that were actually really good at what they did that I realized that my forte was more on the audio side of things. So then, yeah, my family and I were there. My kids grew up, and eventually have one of my sons has got now 5 kids, and so I have 7 grandkids. And at the time there were 3, and they were all living in SoCal with near us. Their family moved to Austin. My son works outside of Austin for Adobe, and so we were already feeling like it may be time to move on, but we didn't know what that meant. So once they moved to Texas, and I have family out here, I've had family out here for quite a few years, and so that kind of pushed the needle in the direction of Texas, and this job opening popped up, and we had done a couple of crusade events here in Dallas, so I had already made personal connections with some of the guys here. And so when I saw this job pop up, I reached out to them directly, and about 6 months later I was moving out here.
And Blake, growing up in Southern California, I went to Harvest Crusades when I was younger.
Oh, really?
Oh.
And these are like stadium events. They were really kind of archetypes of the Billy Graham Crusades. It's, let's bring in some great bands, some great Christian artists, and let's get 50,000 people in a stadium and share the gospel. And then, for like an hour, they would have an altar call, and just thousands and thousands of people coming forward to receive Christ. These were huge and amazing events.
That sounds really awesome. I'm surprised they had enough people at the foot of the altar to handle that many thousands of people coming forward.
Well, they actually put them. It's the flagship event is at Angel Stadium, and so they open up the outfield for that moment, so people can come down and they stand on the outfield, and then and get them off as soon as they can, because we're usually there in the middle of baseball season. So.
Yeah, I know you guys are getting
infield is off limits, but they open up the outfield for that moment.
I know you guys are getting saved from the pits of hell and all, but we got a baseball game to play.
Well, it's not like they're picking them up and dragging them off, but there is, they wait a reasonable amount of time, and then when the crowd starts to thin, they start to escort them off.
So, Mike, I got the fun chance to come tour Prestonwood. Was about 6 months ago I met you, and that was the first time I'd actually been in that auditorium. And, you guys are probably top 1% as far as like size and technology of a church worship space. Talk to us just a little bit about what kind of systems you guys are running. Like, are you doing, the upgrades you've done over the last couple of years? I know you're, in the middle or have done a recent line array upgrade. So what are you guys running? What are you guys working on?
We upgraded to Digico a couple years ago. And so we have those at front of house monitors and broadcast. And we're running Shure Axient wireless. And we currently, we're going to be upgrading our PA here beginning of summer. So we'll be moving up to D&B Soundscape with the XSL. So that's taking a year to get here because of supply chain issues, but we should be doing that at the beginning of summer.
Okay, and we heard the Soundscape, obviously a much smaller version, at the MXU headquarters. Blake, you were quite impressed, were you not?
That is truly the most connected to sound I have ever felt in my entire life. I mean, that was there's no way to describe it, because when I was in it, I thought I don't even have words for this. It was incredible.
Yeah, the best way I've found to describe it is like mixing with RGB to mixing in color, or like full color. It's pretty amazing the sonic depth and spread that you can get out of it.
And are you is your headspace prepared to mix differently once you have that system in place? And then how are you training those under you that are also mixing?
Well, I mean, all of it's mostly mental right now. I mean, like we've gone to hear another installation of it. We had a demo. They actually brought a rig in here and did a full demo in our space for us. So I've already got the kind of the mental. I'm working towards like mentally how I'm going to do all this and how I'm going to do the bus structure and try to make that all work. I'm working directly with our MD on how we're going to kind of adjust our tracks rig to accommodate this. Because the big thing that we want, I mean, because I know we're going to talk about the Christmas thing, but like Christmas is kind of its own animal. But like wanting Soundscape to not be a distraction for Sunday mornings, because I feel like the temptation can be just because you have the tools to use it and just throw things into the surrounds. And I really, really am trying to get that 95% of the things that are never going to change and never going to move nailed down. And then that way you can play with the rest of it and make it to where if like you muted it, people would notice that it was off, but with it on a regular Sunday, they wouldn't. It just kind of helps pull everybody's attention towards what's happening on stage.
Got it. And how's the level of people that are mixing front of house? Is it, very capable people that can all level up to that Soundscape world? Or are you going to have to, set new training standards or new standards for the guys that mix front of house?
Yeah, it's kind of the wild, wild west, honestly. I mean, it's a new world. I've reached out to a guy that does some stuff on Broadway to try to pick his brain on some things. At first, anyway, it'll primarily be me, and then one of the guys here, our other audio guys named Brian James, he will be also stepping into that. So it's going to be one of those things. I think for a bit, it's going to just be me trying to figure out what works and get it really nailed down, and spend a lot of time in virtual sound check and getting things, and then kind of once I figure out best practices, then passing those on and getting other people trained up. Because again, there's not a lot of people doing this, particularly on the scale. So it's like a left-right mix. Like I can walk away, and there's a couple of guys that can step in and do that, and it's going to be great. But this is one of those things where I kind of want to set the best practices from the beginning, so where we're not hamstringing ourselves for things down the road.
This is opening up a whole new world of mixing tactics and the things that we can accomplish. So Mike, you kind of glossed over it, but yeah, we want to talk about your viral moment recently. And Blake, are we just blaming Brian Bailey?
Oh yeah, like I'm in the bus. You're in the back of the bus, shouting, and we're gonna back up over him.
Yeah. So was it Brian Bailey's decision to put this drummer boy in the air that got you guys a whole lot of attention recently?
Well, first of all, it wasn't a drummer boy. I think there's 7.
It's a fleet of drummer boys.
Oh man.
Yeah.
What is the group name for a group of drummer boys? Is that a drum of boys? You know how there's like a flock of geese and
I don't know.
Mike's not going to help us out at all on that joke. Okay.
I don't even know what that would be. No, and we also have angels. We have flying angels. So yeah, that was Brian's video. And honestly, he just posted it just because this is something we were doing. We were in the middle of it. And I started hearing that it was kind of making its way around. And then eventually I got people sending me clips of it that they're popping up in their feeds, like people from like California and Montana. I had people just sending me clips of this thing. And then you kind of started realizing how out of hand this has gotten. And at one point, actually, because there were thousands of comments about it, and almost all of them were negative.
Really?
Brian personally got like 25 DMs that were all positive. Like nobody personally reached out with anything negative. It was all just armchair quarterbacks that don't know what they're talking about. So at one point, Brian pulled it down, but then the church administration started getting wind of it, and he put it back up again and figured we're going to ride this wave. And I think it gave us an opportunity. Brian was able to speak into it. I know that the senior leadership was able to speak into it in the local paper, and it didn't hurt attendance. We have 14 sold out shows. I forget what the capacity is, because we have to reduce the seating capacity in the room for this show because they pulled some pews out. But I think there's like 60 or 70,000 people that come out over the 14 shows. So it didn't hurt attendance at all. But yeah, so it's just it's frustrating because when, again, people are making comments about they're making assumptions about a mega church. And I can speak to, since I'm in the middle of all this, I don't know, I was probably in the room when he filmed that video, but, the event is self-funded, and, everything's bigger in Texas. So we do this show that's, ends up bringing all these people in. And we've had, I forget what the final number of people that made professions of faith. It was somewhere near 1,000 people that made professions of faith. And so, it's all about getting the gospel out and doing it in an excellent way. And I can honestly say, and it's not just because I'm mixing this thing, but it is top notch. It is Broadway level, what we do. And there's like 1,000 volunteers that do this. So when you watch the show, nearly every person you're seeing is volunteering their time to be there. So, and they commit a lot. So there's not only the 14 shows, there's 2 dress rehearsals and all of the rehearsals leading up to it. So, it was an odd thing to have. Again, I wasn't in the middle of it, since Brian's the one that posted it. He was the one that was stuck in the middle of it, but I was right there through it all, and it was just amazing to watch. It was really, to see the people's negative responses to it was really discouraging at one point, because again, they're assuming that, Jack Graham's got a private jet, and they could have given all this money to the poor, and it's like, okay, we didn't use any tithe dollars for this. He does not have his own jet. We literally give millions of dollars to missions and the poor like every year. So this is a completely separate event that we use just to bring people in to hear the gospel.
Well, I love that all of Brian's personal connections were super encouraging. And I think, outsiders, we like to judge things based on our perception, which has nothing to do with reality. It's fun how social media has opened up that possibility for our current world.
Yeah, fun's a good word for it.
The social media trolls, though, I feel bad for them, because when you're on social to dampen everyone else's good time, that to me tells me a lot more about you than it does anything about me. That just shows that they're just trying to look smart, look cool. Oh, I want to punch the system, whatever that is. They're just trying to rage against the machine. And I heard someone say once, if you wouldn't take a compliment from someone and hold it in high esteem, don't take their criticism and hold it in high esteem either. So I think that's very telling, as you said, and Toby just reiterated, all the personal messages of people who we would actually consider their opinions valid were positive. So there we go.
Yeah. The negative comments were frustrating, but honestly, we all kind of saw it for what it was. It's the easiest thing in the world to sit in your living room and type a mean thing. And, it's stuff that nobody would have said to our faces in person. Nobody in the room would have said those things, but, it's just easy to troll.
And I love that 60 or 70,000 people came to church and 1,000 people had a profession of faith. It's we don't pay attention to the things that God's doing. We just want to judge a situation.
Right. And to that point, a lot of the comments that were made about it was oh, they're flying drummers at church on Sunday. It's none of that happens on Sunday morning. Our Sunday services during GOC, which is Gift of Christmas, our Sunday services are really big, but they're very simple. We actually do less on Sunday mornings during Christmas because our set is all tied into the Christmas production. So it's kind of a standard, a one look kind of a service. It's just worship and a Bible study. There's no flying drummers on Sunday mornings.
Hang on, that's important context. So this wasn't a Sunday morning service. This was something you were doing in addition to Sunday? See, even more so.
Yep.
So it was purely community outreach.
Yep, it is totally community. We do a huge tree lighting event here that's free to the public, but there's and it's right in the middle of GOC. So basically, the church is divided into 2 different work crews. One of them is working on the tree lighting, and the other's working on Gift of Christmas. But there's 10,000 people that'll come out to that on that night, and it's the same thing. It's community outreach, and there's ministers walking all through the crowds and praying with people and inviting them to church. And so, the church is really good about community engagement.
And Mike, growing up in Southern California, I still remember going to the Christmas production at Crystal Cathedral. And I remember as a kid, like, they had flying angels going overhead. And I thought this was the most fascinating thing in the world. Like, how in the world are they getting angels flying overhead? And it was, I don't know, I still remember it. It was a fun memory.
Exactly. That's the anchor. That's. I just found out there was backlash to this literally yesterday. I was shocked because I was watching it, as you said, go through all the Instagram channels and like everybody's reposting it. And I just saw it and thought, this is amazing. And then to find out there was negativity from it really surprised me, because what that's creating is a moment that as you said, like the paper, you guys talked to the paper, you had all these people who would have never come to church to see it. Like that created an entry point into those people that would have never come regardless. And when people are like,
Right.
I could have donated all this money to whatever. Okay, well, how much is someone's soul worth? Like if this makes a big enough splash and an impact that tons of people come to just be curious and check it out, there's a value judgment there that I think is interesting to propose to the haters.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it's a self-funded event. It's a ticketed event, so it's not. We don't use tithe dollars to pay for this thing. So,
even more so, they have nothing to stand on at this point.
right. I mean, I get it in one regard. There's a lot of, there are plenty of mega church scandals out there that people just automatically assume are the case here, but that is not the case here.
Totally. And I think it's great that then we have this to stand up to the scandals, to be like, no, actually, like churches can just do something awesome and it's not a big deal. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So, and then if you're doubting, come this year, especially because we'll be in Soundscape this year and it's going to be awesome.
Legit, like, I want to experience that.
No, okay. So, or if we're going to go there, same. Like when he was talking about it, I was thinking, how do we get there next year to see it? Like, even if we have to drive, have to put a gear run in this, like I want to go experience that.
I mean, my first thing was to tell my parents. I mean, my parents live 40 minutes from Prestonwood, so they would love it.
Because I mean, experiencing that just in the room at MXU, then blowing that up to Prestonwood, I can't even imagine how cool that would be. Speaking of cool stuff, though, speaking of uncool stuff, we can have production's cyclical nature that can kind of grind us up. We can go straight from the large Christmas to Easter production. And then you've got all those events that you did with Harvest Crusades that you used to help to produce. So, like, how do you keep yourself from constantly feeling the pressure, one, of the cycle, and then two, to compete with yourself that you just did last year? It's almost like if you won the Super Bowl every year and then you have to do it, not just win, not just pull it off, but do it even better than last year. I mean, that's a lot of pressure to be on you.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I'm always trying to I'm always trying to prove myself. I'm probably my own worst critic. And so I don't necessarily look at it from Christmas to Easter. It's sort of on a week-to-week basis, like trying to, incrementally make things better. It's super irritating to know that my mixes a year from now are going to probably be better than they are right now because I just want to be right there instead of where I am, But the key to all that, I think, is just communication. The communication here between our media team and worship is really good. And so it's very organized. And so that takes a lot of the pressure off of the Christmas and Easter, especially gift of Christmas. There's not a ton of surprises going into the weekend. Like we all have a lot of communication about what's going to come up and what's going to happen. And at Easter, there's been dialogue, there's been rehearsals, there's been meetings. And so, yeah, I mean, again, I feel like on a personal level, I always want things to be as good as they can be. And I want to, our band does such a great job that I want to, amplify what they're doing, to represent what they're doing to the congregation as best as I can. And so particularly as we go into this new PA and how we're going to handle that, again, it frustrates me knowing that, GOC this year is going to be awesome, but I know that it's going to be better next year once I've had a year of mixing on the system under my belt. So just trying to get it as good as I can, as fast as I can.
And Mike, having done this for over 30 years now and even mixing at one of the biggest churches in the country, how do you personally continue to grow and get better? How do you know that your mix is going to be better next year because you're going to do X, Y, and Z for the next 12 months?
Well, we've already talked about them, but the MXU guys are awesome, and I've learned a lot from them. I've told them this before, but I, in some regards, owed my job here at Prestonwood to them, because my role at Harvest when I left was more of a director's role. I started doing audio, and over time I did less and less and of that, and was doing more of like the supervisorial things. And so I eventually, but audio was still my first love. So I had a kind of an odd trajectory, in that a lot of guys, they go from mixing the audio to the director role, and then that's kind of where they park, and then they do audio every now and then maybe. Well, I kind of went the other way. I went director, and now I'm back. I mean, I'm managing the audio and lighting teams here, but I'm back into doing audio, and it's a real pleasure to do that here. But what I was gonna say is that when I came here to audition, I actually did a couple things in my mix that I had never personally done before, that I had seen on MXU stuff, that I understood the philosophy behind, and really prayed that they worked, and they did. I mean, I'm here, but I've told Lee and Jeff that like I'm here partially because of you guys. So, but yeah, MXU stuff, virtual sound check, and then taking a lot of those things that you learn and just trying to play around and implement them, and then on a Sunday finding out what works, what doesn't, and do it incrementally. Like, there's no dramatic moves that I'm making, and I'm kind of I always have like a fail safe. If what I'm trying is not working, I can go back. But yeah, just repetition. And the new consoles, when we switched over to the Digico consoles, that was a relatively, I had worked on them some before, but really deep diving into that, and finding tools that I didn't know were there, and seeing how those work, and just experimenting.
And Blake keeps joking. Blake knows, I won't say nothing anymore. Like, like two things.
A smidge above nothing.
Yeah. But he keeps joking that he's going to secretly get an MXU subscription and learn everything about everything, and then just like shock and awe us all one day. But I doubt it's ever going to happen, Blake.
I think MXU is good enough that if I had the time to dedicate to it, they could teach me.
I feel like Lee and Jeff would personally have to mentor you one-on-one.
I mean, but think about that viral moment. Suddenly the idiot, like in 5 years from now, just like mixes the show. That'd be hilarious.
You just called yourself an idiot. Congratulations.
I wear it proudly. I should get a shirt, the Church Gear Idiot, and put that on there. Okay, so speaking of moments that can make you feel like an idiot, can be when something goes wrong and when something is stressful. So tell us about a moment when you just really felt the stress of working on like a big production. Was the stress in the planning of it? Was it the execution?
Or was there a disaster?
Was there a disaster? Did you have a Blake in your volunteer team that really just pressed too many buttons?
Oddly enough, in 30 years of doing this, I've never had a stressful situation, so I really don't have an answer. No, I'm just kidding.
I thought he was serious. I was like,
well played.
Yeah. No, but I actually have a few. I had one event, like when digital consoles really started taking off, and the PM1D first came out, I jumped in with both feet and finished an entire long sound check without saving anything that I had done, and recalled to the next band. And then our production guy had them come back up again and do another song. And I was like, oh my gosh, why are we going to do another song? And then realized that I hadn't saved anything that I'd done. Fortunately, back then we were on wedges. That band was all wedges, so I was able to get it back fairly quickly. But that moment has changed my life, because I save all the time. I mean, I'm like, I have the front macro on my console. The first one is a save button, so I save constantly. So my doing production, as long as I have my nightmares, were usually production related nightmares. Like, I'm not running from the killer clown. I'm like dreaming that I can't figure out how to get the sound to come out of the PA or whatever. And I actually had one Sunday where I overslept, and we had a guest band coming in that morning. This was at Harvest. And thankfully the Saturday crew had forgotten to arm the building the night before. And so they had been given a door key code, and they got in the building, and I overslept by like a lot. I think it was about an hour, and I got out of the house so fast, and I got there, and it was like everything out of my nightmares, because I was usually the first one in the building to disarm it and to turn all the lights on and everything. And I walked in, and there's ushers with flashlights in the pews trying to get the pews in order. The band's on stage in the dark. And so yeah, it's like whatever day I was going to die, I'll die the day before that now because of that day. It's like the words of Job, that which I have feared has come true. And then I had one other one where there's plenty of stress, but I was doing freelance for a show. It was an award show in in up in LA area, and we had it was in September, and the sun toasted our console, and it did it over. So we finished. We'd been rehearsing Friday. Long story short, got there morning of, or at later. They had moved our call time to later, and when we got there, the sun had baked our console, and so we had to get everything up and running, and it was incredibly stressful. It's a really high end event, and we ended up starting 15 minutes later, and it was no big deal. But it was like it was one of the most stressed I've ever been in my life, because it was this. I mean, literally, the show almost didn't happen, and the guy that was working with me and I got it going at the last minute. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like the key to most of that, again, is prep and organization. You know, I like to say that the battles are won and lost in pre-production. So you can't wait until you get to the show to decide how you're going to do that. So going into the larger events, there's lots of discussions. There's lots of, I've, dropped stage plots and input lists, and pre-programming is a big thing. I spend time every week pre-programming for the weekend. The worship department gets the tracks for the weekend loaded up Wednesdays or Thursdays, and then go through, listen to all the tracks, make sure that they're balanced out the way, it's just in planning everything, and so that you're not figuring it out on Sunday. But basically, you walk in Sunday, that unless something has changed over the weekend, which isn't normal, but you're kind of, it makes it much more relaxing and enjoyable to mix at that point, because you're not playing catch up.
Yeah, as a planner myself, I love that mindset that really the victory it's going to happen before, like the game, like you're prepping for the game. Well, then you're just going to go out there and get the W. You've already won ahead of time. It's also kind of funny how the scars in our life, or the skills that we have, can be connected to some scar in the past. Like, Jesus is saving souls while Mike is saving shows. Like he's never going to not save after that moment. Scott Ragsdale had that same thing happen to him, and
on a PM1D.
Yeah, so I understand that moment. That sounds terrifying. I literally had a dream last night that I had not turned the videos on for the podcast, because we just started doing some video stuff. And I literally dreamed I'd forgotten to turn it all on.
And thankfully, we have Nathan for that.
Well, I'm supposed to turn the one on the computer, though.
Oh,
so
okay.
that's
you
the
do
one.
have something to do.
There's one part that's going to take me on that one. So that's kind of stressful. When you were in those moments, though, where you're trying to get it going, like, what is going through your head? Like, as you're like, do you have a way to calm the pace down, instead of thinking like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh? Like, how do you center yourself when the console's been baked?
Well, I mean, without trying to sound cliched, I mean, lots of prayer in those moments, and just the phrase that I always remembered was, for such a time as this. So it's like, okay, God, you brought me here. You opened the door for me to do this thing right here, right now, and you knew this thing was going to happen, and so we've all worked hard to make this happen. So please, let this happen. And even in the situation that I was talking about with that award show, I'm assuming most of the people I was working around were not believers, but I was praying, and so the award, or the thing where I didn't save, it was just one of those things. You realize it, and you fix it, and you move on. And again, it has impacted me for the rest of my career. So, like you said, the scars, that scar is a welcome scar, because losing information like that is terrifying.
Toby, you got any church gear scars?
Well, I'm so reminded of his dreams of Sunday mornings. I used to have those all the time as a worship leader.
What were yours?
Well, I would show up and I wouldn't know the songs. I wouldn't have chosen a set list yet. Just things were not ready, and then I'd get up on stage and just have to figure it out. So it was a reoccurring nightmare.
For years.
I
wonder how many people have reoccurring nightmares like this for their profession. Man, well, Micah, a thing that would maybe help us with our nightmares and keep us from those happening is some good sage advice. So, what would you give us for a tech takeaway from Mike Smith?
Well, I would say that it's not as much a tech takeaway, but looking back on my career, relationships are key. You can have the best mix of your life, but in my world, that's just so transitory. I mean, what I do for a living has an incredibly short shelf life. There may be moments in my career that I can look back and remember fondly, but most people aren't. They've come to church and they've moved on. Most people don't remember what happened last Sunday. They're not going to remember what it sounded like. The only thing they'll probably remember is if there was a problem. And as an audio guy, there are a couple of mixes in my past of other engineers that have stuck in my head that I've tried to emulate. But for the most part, what I do is like I said, it's very transitory. And so, you can be really good at your job, but honestly, the people that you work with are going to remember your personality more. Treating people with respect, from the exec pastor down to it sounds demeaning, but from the exec pastor to the housekeeping staff, we're all equal at the cross. And that relationship capital goes a long way towards building trust, particularly with the musicians that we're serving, whether you're at front of house or monitors. The band rarely ever gets to hear my mix, except as we've talked about on social media. So they have to trust me. And so I'll spend time with them before sound check, every Sunday, catching up, sharing, whatever music that we've been listening to. And that would be like another bonus takeaway, is just to listen to music. A lot of tech guys don't listen to music, or all they'll listen to is like podcasts or whatever. And I love music. I love mixing music. I love the band I get to mix, and they're giving me, I got no excuses in that end. Like everything that I'm getting from them is first rate. And so, listening to music, and again, trying to, and communicating, again, since I have a background in music, I kind of speak the language a little bit. And so I'm able to, they've done their part in prepping for the services and learning their parts. So I try to do my part in listening to the music and kind of figuring out what lines and what parts need to stand out and what the balance needs to be. But again, all of that, I can do all that, but they have to trust me that I'm able to do that. And that comes from just the relationships that you build when you're not in the middle of a service.
Yeah, definitely the reoccurring theme has been that the trust is the first foundational block, even above knowing audio, video, visual, whatever it is. Like, you got to have the trust to be able to then pull this thing off together, because it's not just one person in the booth or one person on stage. Like, it's a whole team.
Yeah, the whole idea of the fifth Beatle thing is as cliched as that is, it's I totally
what's the fifth
buy
Beatle?
Into that,
Blake, who is the fifth Beatle?
That's what I know. Like, the 12th man in Seattle is the fans in the stand. Like, is the fifth Beatle like their friendship?
Sir George Martin. He was their producer for the whole time.
Okay, well, no, that makes sense.
You learn something every day, Blake.
There we go. I didn't know there was a fifth Beatle.
Watching you grow up before our very eyes.
Goodness gracious. Mike, I'm just watching Mike's face, like, as he's looking between the two of us. He doesn't know what to do with it. He's like, what is happening here? Well, Mike, if someone was going to find you guys on social to say something nice instead of something mean, where would they find you? What would you like to plug?
I'm on Instagram, and it's my username is the Mike Smith, MIC. So there's
nice
underscores between that. And if you want to check out what the church is doing, I think it's Prestonwood, BC. Is the Prestonwood has a number of Instagram accounts, but I think that's their main one, is Prestonwood, BC.
Does y'all's production team have an account?
Yeah, we have Prestonwood Media, so
cool.
You can check that out. Yep. And that's typically helmed by our beloved leader, Brian Bailey. And so those are probably the two main things that I would point people to.
Great. Man, we really appreciate you making the time to come on the show. I know you got a lot going on and a lot of mixing to do, so we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, so I feel like the secret to having a viral moment on social media is to throw Brian Bailey under the bus.
Oh, yeah, let's just back up over him. I mean, he's the gas in the viral tank.
That's right.
You got to burn him up.
Good old Cuban Pete.
Oh, my goodness. We love you, Brian. We love you.
Well, how can they help make the Mike Smith more viral?
Oh, yes. They so whenever his episode comes out this week, and you're seeing it on social, it's coming up. Reshare it. Tag him. Let's make Mike blow up. Let's make him be more viral than any drummer boy that's ever flew in an air. Because let's be honest, Mike Smith is way cooler than any drummer boy at Prestonwood.
That's right.